I don't know how to explain it. Like, I grew up differently than all the other kids in my like obviously in South Asian culture we call it batch, but in my grade, I think I kind of had a very different experience of life because of the outcome of my middle school. That changed my life forever, and I think if it was done differently, my outcome would have been so much more different than it is now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Oh My Curry Goodness. My name is Hamza Islam. On each episode of Oh My Curry Goodness, I talk to people across different industries about their story and the experiences that have shaped them into who they are today. Now, on my podcast, I focus on people who are of the Gen Z generation because I am a part of the Gen Z generation. And even though we may be relatively a young generation, there are still incredible people who are of the Gen Z generation. And on this podcast, I want to focus on the behind the scenes part of each person as opposed to talking about the destinations because the stories or the behind the scenes part of a person are are some of the things at least make us, or some of the components, excuse me, that make us human beings. So I hope you guys as listeners join me in checking or getting to know more about the guests, see what they went through, good and bad, and I hope you can take something away from each guest. So continue to check back each and every week to learn from incredible people who are of the Gen Z generation. Now, this week, my guest is Uzi Makhdoom, who is a mental health advocate and anti-bullying advocate. Like myself, she is also the host. Well, I'm not a co-host of this podcast, but she does have her own podcast called the Good Life Podcast. And more importantly, Uzi, like myself, except not the same region, is of someone of South Asian descent. I say different region because my parents are from Bangladesh, as I've mentioned 1 billion times, whereas Uzi is of Pakistani descent. So, really excited to speak to a fellow South Asian, fellow podcaster, and learn about her journey with mental health. So, Uzi, thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness.
Thank you for having me.
It's so cool to connect with South Asians, and I'm guessing you love curry. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Uh,
There we go.
yep.
We don't need to go further in that, but you know, I love that, and I love this the fact that you are open about mental health and obviously using podcasting as a tool, and I definitely want to touch on that at some point. But when I was getting ready for this conversation, I think this was a very difficult part. The difficult part of this conversation was trying to figure out what to talk about because you had a difficult journey to get to where you are today. And I really want to start with the fact that there was a point in time where you grew up being bullied. And I know this is a difficult topic to talk about, and I'm not going to push you to talk too much about it. But when you were going through that experience being bullied, I mean, obviously, you know this better than anyone else, or I'm sure a lot of mental health activists will agree, is that the relationship with themselves is important and that needs to be a priority before anything else. Talk me through the relationship you had with yourself when you were going through that difficult experience of being bullied, because it feels like when you're constantly being bullied, it feels like everyone is out to get you. And I've never experienced what you've experienced. So this is just out of like genuine curiosity. Tell me a bit about I guess, how would you describe the relationship you had with yourself when you were going through that difficult time period?
So for me, it was very different. Like, I would say everyone's bullying experience is very unique and very different. Not saying it's a good thing, but from coming from me, who had their bullies actually apologize to me through DMs on Instagram, which is really another conversation to have. But during that time, I didn't realize why I was being bullied, like the topic of like why. And now that I know, I kind of like had that suspicion growing up, but like it was never confirmed, so I didn't want to put it out there saying like I know why I was bullied and like I know this and I know that. So I honestly didn't even know because I had such a strong support behind me with like my parents, my siblings, or my older siblings, my younger siblings, cousins, relatives, teachers. Actually the teacher at the time, one of my I think six teachers, I don't remember how many, but one of my teachers actually my social studies one was my preschool teacher. So I had grown up with this particular teacher because he kept moving schools, and I kept moving schools every time I graduated, obviously. And I didn't know that he was teaching there. And when so the obviously the higher ups choose like your schedule growing up, and you got like some say in it, like what fun classes you wanted, and then like the mandatory classes, the schedule was picked out by the administration and teachers and stuff like that. And I ended up getting placed in the social studies class that ended up being my preschool teacher. Once again, I honestly that's where like my all effort was. Like people bullied me because I was not friends, but like I was like a daughter to that teacher because I like grew up with him from preschool all the way up to the end of high school, not high school, middle school. So I like knew like he knew my sister. He grew up with my sister. He grew up with me, and his wife taught actually both of us. So then when he would favor me and say, why is she doing everything and no one else is answering? Why is she the one raising her hand doing everything? I think people got a little bit jealous and a little bit like, why is she getting all the attention? Why is she getting all the positive praise? Why is everyone turning towards her? I feel like that's where all the bullying first started coming from because I was that favorite of that one teacher. That no, not one teacher, two teachers. They couldn't handle the fact that I grew up, they didn't know my history with that teacher. They were assuming because I was the favorite, because of favoritism reasons, but no one knew the backstory. And I feel like people assume stuff, and that's where the bullying started. And then because I never even told anyone the backstory because I talked to the teacher. And he's like, there's no reason for you to explain yourself or your backstory to them. That's our personal relationship of student teacher that I see you like a daughter because I like, help grow you up alongside your parents. And that is not a lie. That is complete truth. And I mean, I wanted to tell my friend stuff, but I also wanted to keep that daughter-father relationship type of teacher relationship type of thing, like in my private life, because it was my personal relationship. It was my personal, like he knew my parents, he knew what my parents expected from me, he knew my sister, he knew my personality, he knew me, and people were jealous that I got more attention from him and got all the praise and got to sit behind the teacher's desk and didn't really have to come to class or like I got to sit in way back in the back of the classroom. I didn't have to like do other things that kids had to do because once again I was different and I had ADHD. So I didn't have like a lot of energy and then when I did, I was answering all the questions all the time, being able to speak out. I don't know, I was outspoken from a young age. And I didn't know that. And then when people after I think in middle of high school, towards the end, when I did end up telling my friends like I had a personal relationship, like father-daughter type of relationship, and that he grew me up, they like the bullies apparently they told the bullies and the bullies apologized because they were jealous of that and they were jealous of my smile because no one could ever take it away from me because I had that support behind me. And I think that bullying experience, like at first, it was awful and traumatic because I didn't have any friends. I only grew up without having like my extended family, my parents, my siblings, and those teachers behind me. And I didn't have no one else. I didn't have kids my age. I had adults. And I feel like that honestly changed my life. I don't know if I can say it changed my life, but it changed my life from like I don't know how to explain it. Like I grew up differently than all the other kids in my like obviously in South Asian culture we call it batch, but in my grade, I think I kind of had a very different experience of life because of the outcome of my middle school. That changed my life forever. And I think if it was done differently, my outcome would have been so much more different than it is now. If that makes sense in any way,
Yeah,
shape, or
I see where you're going with this. It can be definitely a difficult journey, and I totally get where you're coming from, and it can be hard to explain. I've been in those situations, so you're not alone. And I think what you said is really important because it was really interesting, which was the fact that no one knew the relationship you had with your teacher, and that's why, these things happened. And it's difficult because you see one side of the story, but you don't see the other side of the story. And when you once you realize it, it all makes sense. And I wish that people understood that earlier on so you wouldn't have to go through this difficult challenge. Now, there is one thing I, oh, go
Like,
ahead.
sorry to cut you off. But the one thing I think people see, like, they would peek through the door is during lunch. We had free period, basically, like right after we usually have free period, or right before we have free period. And anytime I had a bad day, I would eat lunch with him, or like I would hug him, and I'd be bawling my eyes out, like bawling. And people wouldn't understand why I went to him and I didn't go to anyone else. And I think that also like had a little bit of a play a part in it because they always saw me going to him being my role model, him being like the person I trusted in that school, and nobody knew the backstory. And I'm kind of glad I didn't say anything at first because that relationship kind of fell through like after middle school. I mean, I'm still in contact with them, but I don't talk to them very often. But then when I do, I'm like very attached to them. Like they've been part of my life. And like the daycare teachers here, there's only two or three left at the daycare that's like right across the street from me. And he was actually at that school. So being able to talk to them and be like, hey, I still like have a relationship with that teacher. Like, we actually have a summer camp video and they're in it. And I literally watched it 2 days ago and I bawled because I'm moving out after a year and a half because I'm a senior in college, so I'll be moving out soon. And my parents were at a party. My sister was at home sleeping because she had school because she's in college as well. So I was watching, I was bawling. I'm like, we grew up like me, it had me, my sister, my teachers from preschool and daycare, and I was just like, because all the kids that were in that daycare, we're all still connected together. We like follow each other on social media. We text each other, and we were all watching the video, and we're bawling our eyes out. And people don't see that part of it. Like people see that teacher's in our school. He probably has been here year after year after year, but he just started at the school that year when I was in eighth grade. So it was just good luck that I had him again for like the fifth time. That's it wasn't it wasn't orchestrated by me. It was orchestrated by him. It was orchestrated by the school. I had nothing to do with it. And kids thought I had something to do with it, and I didn't. So that once again, assumptions play in a role of bullying because people assume, and it goes on, and then there's rumors, and then you know the drill, the rumors, and yeah.
Yeah, that can be the most frustrating thing, but that's why it's so important to know that, to always have an open mind because there's obviously more to something than what's already seen. Now, you mentioned your teacher that you grew up with, and you described this, I guess, father-daughter relationship. And one of the things that I think you and I can both agree on is the fact that when we meet certain people or when we experience certain things, we can always pick something up from each experience or person that can help us become a better person. So one of my favorite ways of describing this question is similar to how in these like those commercials, those medicine commercials, you see
Yeah.
the before and after. So like
Yeah.
before you
Mhm.
eat curry, you look like this, and then after you eat curry, you look
You
like
look like
this.
this.
Yeah. So I guess like what would you say was the before and after of you? Like like I guess more so in the sense of like when after you had so many conversations with your teacher, what would you say you picked up from him that you've incorporated into your personal life? It doesn't have to be anything like huge. It can be anything like small, like, oh, I used to be a shy kid, but after talking to him, I was this. That's not what I found. That's an example of some
Okay,
sort.
there's so many lessons I picked up from him because I've known him since preschool and now I'm a college senior. So knowing him like literally my entire life from preschool till now, literally my entire life. Oh, dang, there's so many good lessons I've learned. He taught me to always be vulnerable. I think he's the one that first accepted me with my mental health, like being able to bawl my eyes out and being able to tell him like this is what happened in class, or like this kid is picking on me, or this has happened, or someone in my family passed away. He was actually there when my mom's side of my grandparents passed away because I was in eighth grade. So he saw that part of me for not the first time, but like he knew there's always a piece of me that like I don't know how to explain. There's always that piece of me that like I think there's a little he saw as like not me as a little kid, but he saw me as a kid that he knew growing up, the kid that had the spirit, the kid that had like everything, the kid that worked hard, the kid who did everything. And he fathered me up like my dad did because my parents were obviously busy. Not saying my parents did not part of my life. I literally lived in their house, um, but in school, you spend most of your time in school and daycare. I was in daycare. So he was also my daycare teacher. So there's like a two-in-one role played there. So I was always learning like not to care what other people think, not to care what the bullies say, to always walk to the beat of my own drum, to always keep a smile on my face, to always go to an adult if something is wrong, never to hide that from an adult, always get to trust an adult, and that's why I went to him every single time. And I think the one thing I wish I could tell him, like nowadays, I don't really talk to him. Um, he's still a teacher, but he's a teacher about an hour and a half north of me now. And I wish I got to see him more often. Like I don't get to see him. I mean, online I can see him, yeah, him and his wife, but like I don't get to. They used to live 5 minutes from me, and now they live an hour and five. And I wish I got to see them more often because they played a big role in my life. My parents actually still have the pictures of me and them and my sister. Like literally, I have pictures of him from when I was in preschool. I can literally show you. There's him, there's our entire class, and then there's me. Like people in my school did they don't have the access to that. They don't know that. So having him having a father figure in the school and him seeing kids like literally pick on me. He would literally buy me lunch from Taco Bell and I would sit with him and his wife. He wouldn't let me interact with the rest of the kids because they were really all bullying me. So he wouldn't let me go near them. And he would have my seat either in the way front where people he can see everyone or way in the back so nobody picks on me. And I think no other kid got to experience that and that was jealousy out of everyone else. And I got that like fatherly like he looked out for me, basically. He looked out for me. And that's something I always learned to like look out for myself. That's why I think I look out for others as well, because that's how I was brought up. So I think that had a role to play in my life, and that's why I'm an advocate, because like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you for sharing that because it helped me understand more about that relationship you had with the teacher. And it's because it's one thing to see like, oh, this person's having this unique connection with the teacher, but there's always like a why
They were
aspect.
confused. Yeah, like
Yeah.
why?
But once you understand the why, you understand that there's more to something than it's much more not necessarily much more complicated, but I hope you get where I'm going with it, where it's like
Yeah.
there's more to it than what is already being presented. Um, one thing I do want to talk about before we transition to a next topic is obviously, like I said, that you experienced bullying from an early age. But one thing that I saw that was interesting was that you said that one of the reasons why you did not want to change schools despite this difficult experience is that you said that if you change schools, you would think that the bullies won. And I'm wondering how you knew that was the right decision for you. And it's funny because
Okay.
I have this conversation a lot where when they're going through difficult times, how do they know that despite that difficult time, they knew it was the right decision for them? So for you, when you were going through that difficult experience, I mean, no one wants to be bullied, and it feels like when you are, it feels like everyone is out to get you. How did you know that the idea of no, I don't want to change schools. I want to continue to be here because I feel like that's my version of winning. If I decide to move, then the bullies win. How did you know that
Yeah.
was the right decision for you?
My parents actually wanted to pull me out and put me into my sister's school because they're both charter schools. If you know what that means, you probably do. Because with yeah, so she went to a different charter school here in my city, and I went to charter school about 15 minutes away from here, and I literally grew up there. And I that teacher worked. His wife worked at my sister's school. He worked at my school. So either way, I would have a parent in the school, and I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was, but like I was close with both of them, but I wanted to stay at that school. I had deans fighting for me, but I don't know. I just felt this sort of love that like I felt like I was gonna lose that father figure. And sorry, that father figure, I felt like I was gonna lose a piece of me and I don't know. I don't want to lose my dad. I don't know my dad, but like I don't want to lose him. But I knew I'd be gaining a mom. But like I still talk to them, so it's never like I lost contact. I don't know. I honestly don't know how to answer that question. I still to this day have not. I knew I just want to stay because it's my senior year. I was in eighth grade senior. Um, So I wanted to stay and finish it out because there's literally 4 or 5 months left. Like there's no point of going to school for a new school for 4 or 5 months. It really did not make sense in my mind. And a dean told like there's this thing where the principal actually talked to my entire grade and the teacher's assistant took me on a walk, walk, walk. And then I ended up seeing what was happening and I questioned everybody, but nobody would tell me. And I'm just like, so what's happening? Why is everyone being nice to me? Like it didn't make sense. And then my teacher dad, he took me on a little walk and he's like, there's no need for you to stress. Like, I'm here, you have what you need. Just go on. Because he knew I had this thing for success where I was gonna succeed anywhere I went. But he wanted me to finish out my eighth grade year with him in school. And then he actually ended up leaving right after he graduated. Him and his wife both left his school and went out and 5 minutes away. So I'm kind of glad, like, I got to stay and see it through.
That's really interesting. And I've never moved schools. My little brother has, and it can definitely be it can be hard because you're now being put in a new surrounding, and you go from meeting these group of people to now trying to fit into a new group of people. So it can definitely be difficult, but I'm glad that you have that unique connection with your teacher because he clearly means a lot to you. Now, switching into what you're doing today with regards to mental health activism, I think you and I can both agree on this, which is that mental health can often be looked at awkwardly in the South Asian community.
Yeah.
So I guess let's talk about that aspect. It's similar to how I asked you, how did you know that was the right decision for you to stay despite the challenges you had? When it comes to mental health, what is it like talking about mental health as someone who is South Asian? Because it's a weird subject in the South Asian community, and oftentimes if you talk about mental health, they think that something really is wrong with you without again understanding the full picture.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about something, and if this person sees it, I really don't care because this is my life, and you did this to me, so like I have all the right to talk about that. Here's a funny story. Ready, guys? Ready? You probably can relate to this. You know the word Rishta, right? Rishta. You come on, yeah. Okay, so a Rishta. Okay, I'm gonna say this in my native language, and then I'll say in English. एक रिश्ते ने मुझे तोड़ दिया mental health की वजह से. You understand that? Okay, so. This guy liked me and thought I was cute. He went through my parents and stuff like that, and his parents and my parents talked. And then when they saw I was a mental health advocate who spoke up for mental health, he said, I don't want to marry her because of mental health reasons. Like my mom told me, and I was like, I don't give a bleep about this. And I thought it was funny. I really thought it was funny because like really South Asian of you. Like that shows you really South Asian. You ain't educated. I'm sorry, but that guy's more stupid. He might have a job, he might have a degree, but he's stupid in the mental health education realm. No offense, but that's time to go off about it. Yeah.
Wow, that was interesting. I don't know how to answer. I don't know how to respond to that. So I guess in that sense, and it's difficult because I think number one is that immigrant journey because you're coming from
Right,
one
make it
country,
immigrant mindset.
immigrant mindset, immigrant journey where you're coming from places like Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Sri
Yeah.
Lanka, the list goes on. You're moving to the United States for a better world, so there's that survival instinct. And then I guess when you have kids born in the United States, obviously the way you grew up in the United States will probably be very different from how you grew up in South Asia. And I don't know if you're the right person to ask this, but I would genuinely love to know, like, do you ever think the conversation about mental health, or do you ever feel like there's a sense of I'm not here to like accuse you or anything, so don't make it sound like I'm accusing. But is there ever a time where you feel like it's like, am I doing this right? Or do you ever feel like a sense of selfishness? Because it's like your parents had, or maybe people who grew up in, who had a different childhood than you, they went through a much difficult time. They didn't worry about mental health. But then when it comes to people like us growing up in the United States, knowing that there's so many people who have had experiences with mental health, particularly young people, it's like this is something that exists, but maybe it didn't exist in somewhere else. And sometimes we have that weird like, are we? is this the right thing to pursue at the end of the day? I don't know. It's kind of confusing, but I was trying
So
to figure out how to ask this.
okay, so going back on what I said with the mental health and the South Asian culture, once again, it's like look like frowned upon, you know? Um, but I think you can understand that like not being able to talk about it, like in my family, not in my family, but like in my extended family, we always taught to not talk about our mental health in front of guests or like our uncle's wife's family, like not to talk about mental health in front of them and like to go in a room, cry by ourselves, figure it out, come out, pretend like nothing's wrong. And I did this for the longest time. And one day, just I was like, "This is not working. I'm sorry, but like this is just not working for myself. Like I can't keep doing that. Like this is damaging. I'm sorry, but that's traumatizing." So I was saying, that being the traumatic side of things, like growing up with like people telling you not to talk about your mental health. Obviously, I don't think that the South Asian culture thought about the long-term effects of everything, you know? Being South Asian, like they think like except for marriage, that's when they think long term. But when you think about like everything else, they only think about short term effects. They don't think about long term effects. Um, but it's like the weirdest thing ever because like I don't know how to explain it, but like it was the weirdest thing having so much pressure on me coming from my mom's side of the family overseas in Pakistan are celebrities. So having that also being on top of that, like adding the celebrity part of being on a celebrity family, and then having my dad's side of the family be normal, but also like cousins being celebrity and stuff, like having all this celebrity fame and all that overseas versus here is completely different because here we're like normal people where I'm trying to make a name for myself. Whereas where overseas, my family was celebrities, there was always TVs around and paparazzi and you name it. There was so much extra pressure because of that. So it was always like you have to behave yourself, you have to dress appropriately. You can't go out without a driver. You can't go out without having an adult with you. You can't go out without your cousins. You have to go out together. You could be home before Maghrib, which is after 5 p.m. girls weren't allowed to go out, so you have to do that. And there was so many rules because of that. And I mean, my uncles did like force that. Like when my grandpa was alive, he also forced that. And I don't know, it like not being a normal family, being a celebrity family is even more pressure. And I think I, as someone that's like 21 now, even living here, it's more pressure because I'm not a perfectionist because of that. Because they always wanted us to be perfect all the goddamn time. So now I'm always like putting pressure on myself to be like the perfect advocate that's a senior in college that can do everything, that doesn't have any days off, that has no breathing room, that goes to all these club events and meetings, does advocacy, goes to school full time, goes to therapy, like does all this stuff together. And I'm just like, where is my life? Like, I'm so worried about like what people used to think, and now I don't care. And my schedule might be full all the time, but I'm not thinking about like the South Asian community. I'm always thinking about like what can I do to help out others when really I should be thinking about what can I do for myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. A couple of questions before I let you go. The first thing is, I know you talked about how you had your teacher who supported you, you had members of your family support you. Are there any other, I guess you could say, I call it teddy bears in your life where it's similar to how if like let's say when you're little and you're afraid of thunderstorms and the
Oh yeah.
one of the best ways to maybe mitigate or to decrease that fear or mitigate or control that fear is having a teddy bear to help you throughout that difficult night. So I know you talked about friends or friends, family, teachers. Are there any other teddy bears in your life, whether it's past or present?
I actually do. Funny fact, I do. They recently moved out of my high school, but I had two teachers. One was like a mom, one was like a dad. So I kind of had like parents in my school in a way, if that makes sense. They have moved out of those schools because that school is actually sadly getting shut down because of some reasons. And I have them on Facebook, and having those teachers on Facebook and seeing them succeed elsewhere made me happy, but I was so sad because my college is 5 minutes away from that high school. So like anytime I need it, I could drive to them because it was like a 5 minute drive. Um but like not having them there, and now I'm like I'm gonna have to drive 25 minutes just to be there. And now it's like my heart like longs to have them back in my life. And I mean they're in my life because I just texted them the other day, but like in person, I don't get to see them anymore. And I'm just like now I go to school and I come home, I don't even get to go see them. And I'm like I wish I had them back in my life. I wish I had I mean, I have my older siblings that are still in my life, my extended family, my parents, those teachers. But college wise, I don't really have anyone because I am Mrs. Independent, don't need no friends. So that's how I am. So I think those are the teddy bears in my life that I still have because I literally text them every single thing I do in my advocacy. I'll text them. I'll be like, look what I'm doing today. Look what I did. And they're always so proud. And it makes me happy to see them happy because they knew that I could succeed. And having them still in my life, being able to show them, like, you knew that I could do this, but I never knew I could. And look at me now. And for them to see that transformation from me being a freshman in high school to me being a senior in college, seeing that 8 year transformation come through in like 8 years, like seeing me blossom, I guess, because I started advocacy right out of high school, like, the summer of my the summer before my freshman year of college. From then to now is when I started my advocacy. So in high school, I never spoke up. I never did nothing because I was bullied like in high school and stuff as well. So like seeing them like me blossom from 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 till now, it's like the 8 year transformation just like I don't know how to explain it, but like they're always like if you need us, text us, call me. I don't care if it's late at night. Call me if you need me. And it's having those type of like people in my life be like, okay, I can I have people. Okay, cool. This is like cool. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you have I'm glad that you have those people in a way, and I hope that you continue to hold on to those friendships and also build on new ones. The last thing I want to talk about is, of course, your podcast. And firstly, I want to ask you what led you to creating your podcast. I've mentioned how, I've always been curious, or from I think since I was like 9 or 10 years old, that curiosity of learning about people's stories has just been there. So for you, what inspired you to create your podcast? And secondly, what do you feel like, how would you describe the relationship you have with your podcast? Because I consider it as like a friend, a casual friend you can interact with. But I do try as much as I can to help grow the podcast as much as possible. So yeah, obviously first tell me about how it's inspired you to do a podcast, and then also describe that relationship you have with your podcast.
I think my podcast, I only have one episode out. I was gonna release a second one and then I had edited and everything. It wouldn't post no matter what I do because Spotify keeps changing the way you podcast work. So I have to like learn all this new stuff and I'm like trying to make it work. But then I have like the other podcast that I'm also supposed to do after this one. And then I'm also interacting with family friends and stuff. I'm leaving in a year, so I'm like trying to get all this in. I have school. I'm a full-time college senior. I still go to therapy. I have a family. I still have a life. I still have my extended family. I still have like I travel a lot more because one of my uncles moved here in Canada. So now I'm like traveling even more, and I have all these other social events I go to for wellness retreats. So it's like I'm trying to have time for my podcast, and I'm really close to my podcast. Like I share every little, not every bit piece of my life, but like stuff that I've learned on my journey that could help other people, or stuff that South Asian and South advocates should know by now if they have not learned it by now. Because the South Asian community, I'm sorry to say, but they're not informed on mental health. They're really not. No matter what they say, they're really not. And I'm not going against my culture, my race, or nothing. It's just a truth that I've been hiding for the last like 21 years of my life that I finally realized because nobody wants to talk about it. And I really like my podcast. I just have not had time to post on it.
Yeah, well, I do hope that you get to spend more time on your podcast, because I know it can obviously be a really cool tool, but I know you said you're really busy, so I will let you go. But nevertheless, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Thank you
Thank
for
you for
being able
having
to
me.
share your story and finding the positives in the negatives. It's always great to see that you continue to keep going no matter what. So thank you so much for joining the podcast, and I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
You too.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support the podcast in the future, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.